Welcome, Edgemont. This is an online coffee chat. Here we are, Nareen, Jeff, and Lucas. It's a big week for Edgemont. A lot of people care so much about the school. It's our common ground. We have so much common ground to build on. We'll do brief intros. Start with Nareen. We'll share some of the things we've been up to. And if you just arrived, there's a form where you can ask us any question. We're going to keep the questions to things related to Edgemont education. We're not going to talk about the politics of the election. We're going to build on the common ground. All right, Nareen, I'll turn it over to you for an intro.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Nareen Jabor, been a resident of Edgemont for over 12 years with my husband and 3 kids. And I bring over 15 years of professional experience in strategic planning, budgeting, policy development, and performance oversight. And I also bring in scientific rigor and data-driven analysis. And I bring lessons learned from managing international programs that have saved millions of lives. And during my first term, I've worked tirelessly to increase transparency, advocated for community input on key decisions, and I truly believe in genuine community engagement, not decisions made behind closed doors, but collaborative processes that embrace diverse perspectives from all stakeholders. And most importantly, I bring an unwavering commitment to serving every child in our district. Thank you.
All right, Jeff.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks all for joining us this evening. My name is Jeff Blank. I grew up in Edgemont, was graduated class of 99 from Edgemont High School, moved away for a while, came back in 2017 when my wife and I had our first child. He's now a second grader at Greenville. We also have a daughter who's 22 months right now, so she'll be there in a couple of years. I've spent my entire career in public service as an attorney for both New York City and New York State governments. Did a whole lot of litigation against prosecuting negligent landlords in the South Bronx. Then I worked greatly for the Department of Health, doing a lot of regulatory work. And I'm very excited to be on this team, excited for the vote. I'm excited Edgemont gets a choice this year. And really my passion has been about getting people more involved, getting the community more engaged and giving them a voice back. Because since I moved back, I felt a lot like the community has been sidelined and a lot of input that should have been taken into account in decision-making was not. So I'm excited to try and get that message out, and we're happy to answer your questions this evening. Thanks again for coming.
Hey, everyone. Lucas Chaffee here. I'm an Edgemont grad, West Point grad. I served 5 years in the military and then took a passion for open government. Worked alongside the Obama administration when they were rolling out the Open Government Initiative, which was pretty groundbreaking in 2009. Helped a lot of agencies like NASA, Environmental Protection Agency, Department of Transportation, host conferences to bridge the gap between those in government and the innovators that wanted to help creating new technologies, also working with non-governmental organizations. So open government's my passion, and I'm a software engineer, and I work remote, so I bring a lot of that remote and agile thinking to the team. And we'll start here we'll show you our website, we'll take your questions, and here we go. So you can get familiar with us. We're at edgemontexcellence.org. We're running as a ticket, although you can vote for any people you want. We recommend voting for one side or the other because it'll help that vision get implemented with the school board. We have a vision of authentic community engagement. So it's important that if you want that vision, it takes 3 people at a minimum, plus others that are already on the board to work together. So here we are. As everyone knows, the vote is Tuesday at the high school. We have another session tomorrow night, May 19th, and depending on what we learn here tonight, we may open it up a bit more, modify. We're always thinking of different ways to improve public participation here. Here we are. So Nareen's already on the board. Jeff and I overlapped at Edgemont, actually, and have been friends for a long time. You can read more about our bios. This is something you might not have seen, but is really interesting how the Edgemont Chinese Association had 7 questions that they asked both tickets. And I thought it was fantastic because they're using the election as an opportunity to get some of their priorities out there and discussed. So you can go on our website and read there's over a dozen pages of responses here, but it gets really in depth about things that we would support for helping with their priorities. And then you can interpret, like they ask questions about class sizes and academic rigor, field trips, so you can learn a lot about our positions in what they read there. If you have questions that you would like to see answered, you can ask them tonight. You can also email us at edgemontexcellence@gmail.com. We respond to everybody. You can also see how we compare to the other candidates. So the other ticket created their responses, and I think that you'll like what you see when you compare us to them. We stand by our responses, and they're really the starting point for a conversation. I really give credit to the Edgemont Chinese Association for going above and beyond to move the conversation forward about the issues that matter to us and really how they affect our kids. So one of our things that we engage is authentic community engagement, and we had 2 in-person listening sessions. One lasted nearly 3 hours. This was the day before the candidate forum last week, and then the day after the candidate forum had about 2 hours. You can hear some of the audio clips here from us, talking about balancing the curriculum, private school, why we're running together. And here's some of the things we've been hearing from the community. We have knocked on hundreds of doors. It's been really, it's just one of the best parts about being a candidate is meeting the community. And they've come to us, and we've also gone to them. We've gone to all different corners of Edgemont, met people from the entire socioeconomic spectrum, people answering in their lingerie sometimes. When you go home to someone's home, you meet them as they are. And meeting all the pets and the dogs that are running out of the doors. There's been a lot of great moments. All right, so we're hearing that, and both tickets are talking about how the school board needs to do a better job listening. There was something interesting this week in that they adopted 3 of the things that we've been advocating for months. Specifically, the idea of coffee chats, and then answering questions at board meetings. Currently, you can ask a question, you won't get an answer back immediately. And that kind of dialogue is very important. And the third one is when people raise concerns at the board meetings, we want to make sure that those are actually in the roll-up that the superintendent sends. People should know what others are saying at the board meetings. We're hearing that academic rigor is declining. One thing that we hear over and over again is parents are surprised that there's really a need to often send their kids to extra training at like Russian School of Math and other places. And there's a really strong need for people to want to have the school deal with that organically, where there's not as much of a need for going above and beyond, that the school can handle it. Talking about morale at the school is a very important issue. If you could fix morale, you could fix a lot of things. And then just leaning forward into the future. AI is changing education, AI is changing the workforce, and we need to be ready. All right, if you want to find out information about whether you're registered to vote, you can do that here. And you can learn more about our bios down towards the bottom. All right, I'll stop sharing there. Let's see what questions we have. For those that are just tuning in now, here's the form where you can fill out questions. In the chat. All right, first question up. I'll paste it in the chat. This one comes in from Liz Silverstein. First question here. I'll read it out. Jeff and Nareen, if you want to take it. Would you support exploring updated methods of maintaining organic natural grass fields? Examples are the Tarrytown School District. They have 5 natural grass fields. Chip Osborne provides instructional videos to schools and municipalities.
I mean, I don't see why there would be any reason not to look into new methods of maintaining grass fields. It seems like a completely logical thing to investigate on, in my opinion, at least. I won't pretend to be an expert on organic grass fields, but I know there's constantly developments in improved, more ecological ways to maintain them, or more resource-friendly ways to maintain them. So especially if there's other school districts that are comparable that are doing that, I would think it makes sense to look into those and see how they could be implemented in Edgemont.
Nareen, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we definitely should be able to explore different options and see what, would be the best effective method for our fields. I'm always up for researching and exploring other options.
Yeah, personally, I was captain of the Edgemont baseball team. I love playing on grass myself, but I think one important thing is when you take a position like school board, it's not about your personal preferences. You're a conduit for the community's interests. And sometimes you do things that personally you would rather see different, but it's a role where you serve the community. It's public service. Um, I believe that strongly. All right, we have another question here from Liz, also on the topic. I'll read it out loud. Would you support determining, possibly via petition, if the district is concerned about the installation of the synthetic baseball softball field from a health and environmental health perspective? I can take it first. I think there's a few parts to this. So there was a quote from the other ticket in the candidate forum where they said essentially, we shouldn't be relying on SurveyMonkey. And I agree. I think, though, there wasn't a solution proposed. But at one of our listening sessions, there was an interesting idea that came up, part from one of the participants and part from us, where we built on it, where there's a need to really understand what the public thinks. So what we do currently with Google Forms, you can't verify that someone's actually an Edgemont resident or a voter. So creating a system where it's easy for the school board to put out surveys and know that each of the people that are responding are verified as Edgemont residents, that could be really helpful. So the first thing is, I think we need a system. Petitions and surveys are kind of similar in many ways, but I'd say not really thinking about petitions, but more, Liz, I'd say a survey where you can actually know how people feel, where they can respond and know that their an answer is actually anonymous, yet the school would know that this is a verified resident. Then they could be more honest and not worry about any sort of backlash on topics where they might not support a field or something like that. But personally, I'd say I think this is an important topic because we're looking at spending $8 million on, and it's already approved in the last budget for that upper field, for it's that field for the baseball and softball field. But I think that if the community strongly feels like they want to look at that again, it would have to take a large number of people in the community that want to relook at that because it was already passed in the bond. But I think that if the community wants to relook at that question, yeah, there could be a way to see what the community wants. Do they want to modify that project? I think if a lot of people wanted to, like a vast majority, then it's natural that the board would listen to the community, especially since there are financial concerns. It's a very big, expensive project. And given all that's happening at the national level and the economy, people might want to be much more careful with how we're spending money. So I think it's an important question. But then again, it takes you take a majority of the board to do anything. So that's just my one opinion is I think we need a petitioning and a survey system and yeah, if the strong number of people in the community want to relook at any question or any policy, then that's our job as board members is to listen to the community. All right.
I would just add on, I think on the turf issue, I know people have been coming to meetings for months and months and asking for kind of the evidence that the board used to support their decision making and hadn't really gotten answers. And I saw recently that they finally got an answer saying, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Lucas and Nareen, but that the board was no longer going to comment on this in light of potential future litigation or something of that nature. So which I think is somewhat problematic that people have been asking questions for months and then that is the final level of response. And if there was evidence that they were relying on, instead they were relying on, then that should have been produced. And now and I can understand why if their attorney is concerned about that, they may have given that advice, but it just seems like it's evidence of some of the communication problems that have been going on for quite some time that hopefully we can address in the future.
Thanks, Jeff. We have a follow-up question from Laura here. I'm all for grass fields if it can be done cost effectively and it makes sense. But didn't the administration school board say that since the bond passed, it cannot be altered, like we're married to turf? I would expect that the community can always vote again to change any vote that the community already approved, but I'm just guessing at that. I think that'd be a really interesting to know the answer. So I don't know the answer to that, Laura.
Well, I mean, I don't, we obviously voted on this bond and the elements of this bond cannot be modified. That is true. Um, but I think this, if there's a strong community support for not moving forward with, for example, like we're talking about a turf field, um, I think my understanding is that we, from our discussions with our assistant superintendent of business, is that we don't necessarily have to follow through with the project. We can't modify it, but that's something we need to confirm with Brian Paul.
We have a question here from RDT. I'll paste it in. Would you support adding non-European world languages to the curriculum?
Currently, right now, we only offer Spanish, French, and Latin. There are many other school districts in the area and outside the Westchester County area that offer more language options. And again, if there's a strong desire for this from the community, then that's a conversation to be had with the administration. Again, as school board members, we are a bridge between the community and the administration, and it is our duty to relay that level of information and have a conversation, have a discussion that's constructive and again, it falls back on there's a prevalent desire from the community.
I'll add my thoughts. So I'm not a board member. I would be going in as someone who has a lot to learn about being a board member. So I go in as an open book. And in other words, I'd be absolutely supportive of that. I think the board doesn't choose which languages would go in. It's up to the administration, but the board can express the opinions of the community. So just being a conduit for what the community wants, I think there might be strong support for Mandarin to be added. But I think we really need a tool to understand in a reliable way, not just Google Forms like we currently rely on in school district, but what do actually Edgemont residents want and support? And if we knew, then it makes the board's job very easy to represent the public opinion. Next question, also from RGT. What is the role of a board member in holding the superintendent accountable? If the community feels he or she is not doing well, what is the mechanism to communicate that?
I think the superintendent, we discussed this a bit at the other open forum, is essentially the chief executive of the district, and the board of education acts as kind of the board of directors, and it has to provide oversight of the superintendent, including a rigorous review process. And one of the things that our ticket is advocated for is more of a 360-degree review, which doesn't currently happen with the superintendent. And that would allow us to get input from all the stakeholders that the superintendent's actively dealing with, and really kind of get a better understanding of their work product. It is supposed to just doing a one kind of top-down approach for the review. So that would provide a more holistic feedback and allow us to have better oversight, I think, going forward.
The main roles of a board is to hire and fire a superintendent. And as we go in as new board members, there's so much that we have that we don't know. So we don't go in with any assumptions and follow the process. One thing that we are advocating for is a 360 review where everyone that works with the superintendent has a say from their perspective. That's something that other school districts do that we don't do yet. And that would be a way for us to have a really reliable process relating performance. All right. Next question, RDT. Paste it in. Why are we installing dugouts on the fields, softball and baseball fields, when the school has trouble fielding a team for softball and baseball every year? Shouldn't the money be used for things that more students can use? I'll take this since I was captain of the baseball team, and I'd say I know that we're fielding a varsity team. I also believe we're fielding a JV team without any problem. I think there might be difficulty with the modified team filling it out completely. I don't know for sure. Um, Personally, I think that the fun part of baseball, you want a great field. I don't think the dugouts are so essential. We should look at saving money outside of the classroom so that can be spent inside the classrooms. That's my approach. Just one voice here. But what wasn't so great about the how the last bond was done was that there were so many items packed into one vote, and it was either for or against. And everybody wanted the air conditioning, so there was no option for people to kind of separate the must-haves and the nice-to-haves. And I think one way to really respect the community is, as the board and administration say, here are the need-to-haves and here are the nice-to-haves, and separating that so that the people can have more choice. Right. FLW has this question here. What ideas do you have to maximize learning in school so that kids don't have to rely on tutoring or other programs to stay on pace or to get ahead? The current school experience assumes a ton of reliance on parents and outside programs. Great question.
Good question. We've heard that concern over and over the last, few weeks, talking to community members about needing to supplement our curriculum. I think this shouldn't be necessary, and we are committed to really ensuring that our curriculum is at a high standard and meets the high expectations of our community. And one of the things that we need to understand exactly is where parents feel our curriculum is falling short. So we really need to study this specifically, and that's a lot of, that falls under the purview of our Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment, and really also perhaps look at a comparison of curriculum with other school districts that are, known for academic excellence as well, and really identify those specific areas for improvement in our curriculum.
I would like to see, in terms of outcomes, less reliance on external tutoring. For years, I've heard that when we had a student that graduated a few years ago who was babysitting our kids. He said that was one of the top things on his mind as a student at Edgemont. So love to see that it not be necessary. As a student at Edgemont in the 90s, it wasn't as necessary. Of course, things change, but our kids are busy, they're stressed, there's a tremendous mental health problem. I think that there's some statistic that like 1 out of 3 high school students like actively considered suicide at some point in their teen years, something like this. It's quite alarming. Sorry, I can't explain the exact quote, but when I read it, it was just shocking. So our kids are overprogrammed, and we need to make the most of the time in school so that time outside of school, kids can be kids.
It would also be useful to know, I think, exactly what areas parents are relying on. We've heard it on all different areas of kind of outside enrichment, but all of those kind of speak and provide evidence of the areas where the curriculum could be beefed up. So if we had kind of a way of assessing that, I think in talking to the community more, getting better input, it would allow us to then bring that back to the head of curriculum and kind of deal with them and give them more information on that. So I think kind of getting better information from the community on outside enrichment speaks to areas in the curriculum that they find are not fulfilling their children's needs.
Another question on curriculum here from Aisha. There's so much emphasis on STEM and math, which is great, but our writing and critical thinking curriculum seems to be on the decline, especially in the middle and high school. we'd love to hear your thoughts on how you might approach this issue. Thank you. I can start. So we've knocked on a lot of doors, and um, we hear that English writing skills are, from a parental perspective, are not. Um, Kids aren't being pushed as much in English as they have, and as parents might expect, that the writing assignments are not as robust. Now, these are just anecdotes. So I think that regardless of who is elected, the next board should do a pulse check, a temperature check on a lot of aspects of the Edgemont education to hear how widespread are these concerns. Hearing that students in eighth grade are not writing essays, to me personally, is surprising. And um, I think that that should change. I don't know what I would do necessarily at this stage because my focus is on community engagement. So I have a lot more to learn on curriculum, but it's why we're all here, why we came back to Edgemont for the curriculum. So I would be really interested in seeing this resolved.
I mean, I think one of the ways that we could sort of help in this area is perhaps, obviously to work closely with our assistant superintendent of curriculum again, right? And so do perhaps a curriculum audit, which means we would, he would do conduct a targeted review of the writing curriculum and instruction practices, especially at particular target areas, grade level areas, and really do a comprehensive, review of the current writing assignments, the frequency, the assessment methods, um, and really work on establishing clear benchmarks for writing instruction frequency and quality, and report on that progress and share that information as well with families. And sometimes what we've done before, when we have areas in which we're trying to improve, is create a task force, with teachers, admins, maybe other stakeholders, to really develop specific recommendations for writing instruction in the different grade levels. So these are some of the things that we could advocate for as board members.
All right, the next one up from MS. Do you have a plan to address the hate speech incidents which were recently outlined in an email to parents from Dr. Hamilton? So I live on Central Park Avenue, and I recently started the Central Park Avenue Civic Association, and it was dormant for a while. And we cover Dromore Road. And as part of this campaign, we're also going to meet new residents to earn their vote. And one resident's comment struck me. Essentially, don't want to reveal any private information, but essentially they're saying like they're really concerned about the diversity numbers at Edgemont, in particular, how few African Americans there are, and really concerned that her son would not be welcome or not fit in. And I'd say this is a real concern. It's a real concern by a real person. Now, I think because Edgemont is so welcoming, it's an unfounded concern, but it shows that there's a need through communication to earn that trust of our newest residents. So I think dialogue is an important answer. And I mentioned the Central Park Avenue Civic Association because civic associations can have a role here. So being a bridge from the district to the community. As we had our listening sessions last week, when people came in like really in opposition on certain topics, through listening, they understood other people's perspectives. there's a lot of different dialogue methods that can happen to build trust in a community. And I think there's also a restorative justice professional that works at the high school that helps students resolve differences, or at least those that get in trouble, or maybe they're tardy or things like that, and they can understand some ways to work through that. I think so the school now has someone with this capacity of dialogue, and bridging that dialogue with the community can be pretty powerful. I don't know the specifics of the hate speech incidents. It seems like there are many more than is acceptable. None are acceptable, but it just seems like also one that comes to mind actually right now, right around the time of the pandemic, I saw anti-Chinese graffiti written on the road from Old Army Road up to the high school track. I reported that to the superintendent, Victoria, at the time. I didn't hear that shared with the community, so I don't know what the extent of these problems are, but um, this is an opportunity for us to grow together as a community. It's not acceptable, and we need to work not just by sending emails about things, but we need to work on these things. I don't know what work is being done right now. I'm not saying there is or isn't any, but this is very important. Edgemont is very special because of its diversity. It's unlike anything else in Westchester, and our diversity has to be a strength that brings us together. All right, on the question of diversity, Jason brings up a question. It's a long one here. It was on the transgender topic brought up on Facebook. And also Laura had a question about, is our ticket anti-LGBTQ? And that we were going to address this tonight. Well, our ticket is absolutely accepting of everyone. We are for all means all. We take that very seriously. Just personally, I've got transgender people in my family and coworkers, and we as candidates personally and professionally are very accepting of everyone. There was a question of something I wrote on Facebook. It says, if the community wants to have a conversation about any policy, would we support having that conversation? As a blanket statement, yes. If a large part of the community wants to have a discussion about any policy, talking about significantly large policy, our job is to listen to the community. So there has to be a balance. We never want the board's actions to make people feel unwelcome. So some of these topics have to be addressed very sensitively, and it can be done. Edgemont's a very welcoming place. It can be done. All right, George Farina asks the question, how can families with kids not yet in school get more information about the school?
I think one of the things that our campaign has really advocated for is doing outreach beyond families in the school. Obviously, there's things we've talked about that can be improved just with communication within the school district, but we've heard both from families that don't have children in yet, and also families who are now empty nesters, that they're not really feeling included. So each of those communities has different wants and needs in terms of what information that they want to receive. Certainly, I moved back to Edgemont and I'm familiar with it, obviously, before because I went to school here, but before my son was in kindergarten, moved back when he was less than a year old. So we weren't getting a lot of information, had we not already known things, we would have kind of felt out of the loop because it's harder to meet people and it's harder to kind of feel tapped in. So I do feel like there's an area for the school district in general to just be more communicative. I'm sure there's already policies and outreach that exist, but one thing we've talked about as a campaign is kind of increasing the ability to opt into newsletters, do kind of mailings that hit the entire community, alerting them of newsletters of that variety, so that you can, let the district know that you want to hear about news, you want to get more information, and make it very accessible to the entirety of the Edgemont community. Just to kind of facilitate those relationships and get them into a healthy state much earlier, will kind of have long-term results as these families enter the school district later, I believe.
Noreen, anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we could definitely, do more in terms of, creating an opt-in system, especially for people who don't have their children yet in the school district, or even for those that are empty nesters or any other type of taxpayers that don't have kids in the district. So we definitely need to enhance our ways in which we, do our outreach to those, community members. And some of the things that we could think about is probably create, hosting, you know, periodically information sessions for these residents, so that they can learn about, things that are coming down the pipeline, and things for them to anticipate for their kids, that are going to be transitioning into the school system. Um, so I think this is an incredibly important area, in which we need to do better in, and I know that we have the capability to do that. It's, you know, so it's really important we focus on getting that information and connections to those community members.
Excellent. All right, next question's from Barbara. How would you propose the communications between the board and administration and the community reaches everyone in the community and not just those directly involved, such as parents and students? Yeah, one thought here. We definitely want to be environmentally friendly and not use a lot of paper, but there's a small number of people that really prefer paper, older generation, and I think we should honor that. It won't cost a lot, but if that's their preference, we should find that out and then keep them in touch. Maybe it's 5, 10% of the community that would rather receive paper. Something to consider. Jeff, anything to add?
Yeah, we heard in our listening sessions that a lot of people were nostalgic for things like the Blue Book, which, if you've been in Edgemont for a long, long time, you may remember. I don't know when it went away. And there was kind of discussions about how, and that used to be a book that included all the necessary contact information for all the various departments within Edgemont, and included the calendar, and just kind of, it was your one-stop shop for calling people. That was, came into being way before the internet and all the new ways of communicating that now exist. But there was a kind of call for that type of easy reference from some of the people who used to rely on it. And I think we could there are ways you could replicate something like that without having to print a large book and send it to every person in the community, using things like quick mailers that then have either QR codes or quick instructions on how to access those and allow you to opt into various things. But there did seem to be a request from some of the empty nesters to have something like a mailing that points them in the direction of the internet. Most of the people we spoke to were comfortable getting things delivered online, even if they might have preferred print, but they were comfortable with it. So the trick seemed to be, in our discussions at least, was to how to get them access to those online tools. And it seemed like the bridge on that gap was through potentially mailings that let them very clearly see where to go and kind of which options they would want to receive.
All right. Next question. Would you support the school offering performing arts as an academic program? How would the board make this happen if the community wanted it?
So I could answer that. So if the community wants a strong performing arts academic program, I think there's multiple steps that need to be taken. So obviously, first, you always need to start with an assessment and planning phase. So first, you need to really understand do a needs assessment to identify what are the current gaps and the community priorities. Um, you know, we always form a planning committee or ad hoc committee of some sort with the various stakeholders to gather enough input from all the various folks. And then we also usually visit other districts that have really stellar arts programs to really gather those best practices. And really then I think the other thing would need to be done is develop like a multi-year implementation plan with clear benchmarks. And just as importantly, you have to figure out how you're going to allocate resources, right? And so administration needs to then think about ways in which the types of funding and investments in the next budget cycle. And sometimes some of these things can't always happen in one shot. They have to be done in phases, so that it can manage the finances and sustainability of that, and fiscal responsibility with that as well. And then you're going to have to think about the actual curriculum development for it. But I guess, all of this starts with the community engagement component, right? And developing, and understanding the needs and the gaps and how these things could be best addressed. So it's a multi-process thing that needs to take place, but that all starts with obviously this, having that strong support from the community for a better program.
All right, the next question is from Nalini. Would the candidates on this call support a bell-to-bell smartphone ban across the three schools? My quick answer is I like that idea, but it's as I mentioned before, I don't see my role as a board member to implement my preferences. My role as a board member is to be a conduit for the community. So something like this, I think people feel very strongly about. I don't think 7 people should make the decision for everybody. This is something that requires engaging the community. I'll turn over to Nareen and Jeff.
I believe it passed in the recent New York State budget negotiations. I believe there's a coming in the fall ban on bell to bell smartphones are in all New York State public schools. I have to double check that, but I'm pretty sure it ended up in the final version of the budget. So it would be the board's responsibility to then implement that policy, because I think the last I read about it, there was discretion for implementation, but the ban essentially will become law, or it became law, so it'll be phased in starting this fall, I believe.
That's how I understood it as well.
All right, 2 questions related to superintendent. I'll put them both together. How well do you think Dr. Hamilton is performing as superintendent so far? I think he sends a lot of emails and I see very little action for change, is what the person wrote. The second question, what is the primary job of a board member around superintendent accountability? How can community members who are dissatisfied with his performance make that known? I'll chime in with, I think part of the 360 review is community feedback on superintendent, also the assistant superintendents. I think it's important that they're evaluated by everyone who is interacting with them. And I think the board and the community absolutely have a role in that. Um, I am a parent, so I only see Dr. Hamilton from a parent's perspective. So I think from a parent's perspective, honestly, we have a limited understanding of everything that he does. So I don't give my I don't feel like I have enough information as a parent to know how well he's doing. But going in as a board member, I mean, the whole board makes this decision as 7 board members. And there's some people who have been on the board now for 5 years. So I think that then they have other superintendents to compare against. So personally, I'd want to hear what they have to say. And like I said, we're a conduit for the community. So if the community feels very strongly one way or another, that should absolutely play a role in the evaluations. And the specific question is, how can the community members who are dissatisfied with his performance make that known? There's no formal process for that right now, but we would advocate for that to be part of the 360 review. Jeff, anything you'd like to add on this?
No, I agree. I mean, I have no current personal interaction with Dr. Hamilton, so I would don't feel in a position to be judging him. I think it obviously is the role of a board member to be very involved in that process and to listen to the community's responses. I certainly, having ever since the campaign started, a lot of people have come up and have very strong opinions both ways on Dr. Hamilton. So I know there is a lot of input that the community is eager to share, and I think giving them an outlet in some way to funnel that into kind of some kind of accountability mechanism as part of review may provide some value. Certainly something that potentially should be looked at as if we were to incorporate the type of more holistic review that we're suggesting.
All right. MS asks a question. Sounds like you've been proactively reaching out to members of the community during your campaign. What do you believe to be the top issue concerns in the community? What's your solution? On our website, this is what we're hearing at edgemontexcellence.org. People generally feel the school board's not listening to them. We had the bond fail last year, first time in decades. And I think that we have a lot of solid ideas for just, and the board actually adopted just a few of them, but that's just the beginning, is having it be more conversational, like the coffee chats that used to happen, answering questions at board meetings, including community voice. Like, all these are very important. We talked tonight about the ability for a verified yet anonymous way for residents to make their opinions known without any fear of retribution. We're such a small community, people should be able to know that when they share their thoughts, that that they're safe to do so. Academic rigor at the school, people are very concerned about that. Really, that's definitely top two. Oh yeah, Jeff. Right. Did I miss anything? I'll just go through, and anybody else can add anything here. So, school culture, esprit de corps, some of the special things we used to do, even recently, not as much. And then anxiety about the future, because the workforce is changing so much, education is changing so much. These are really important. And so our role as board members is not to come in with like, here's all the solutions, but we got to come in with humility and listening, be a conduit for the community. And there's so much expertise. Like, we are parent volunteers serving in this public role. Our most important job is to make sure all aspects of the community, especially the school community, have a say. The teachers and the administrators are the professionals and the experts. And so they're the ones that can drive us forward. As the board, we can just make sure that these communication pipelines and pathways between all of the entities are strong. We don't have to have the answers, but we can advocate for process that brings all the stakeholders together. Nareen or Jeff, anything you'd like to add there? All right. JY is asking this question here. Our current school counselors seem they don't have supports to help students with registering outside AP exams, such as foreign language AP, that's not offered in our school. Is there a way for our school to work with other school districts like Scarsdale? What's your take on issues like this?
I think this is an issue that represents a perfect opportunity for the board to demonstrate its commitment to both academic excellence and resource efficiency through creative problem solving and collaboration. So supporting our students in this way, in which they're pursuing challenging coursework, should be a priority. And having an inter-district partnership really offers a practical solution that benefits students while potentially sharing cost. But again, this isn't something that we've sort of implemented before. I know that there are high school students that do self-study for AP courses, for AP exams that we do offer AP courses for, but this is something, I guess, that, there are kids that do study, that do want to take on more of that challenging level of challenge, and we should be able to to support all of our students, because we have, very different types of learners, and, and we should be able to create an environment where every student is being supported and their needs are being met. So thank you for that question.
All right, final question here. Laura, as a follow-up, she says, did you say you want to do anonymous surveying so people can comment without retribution? I believe it's important for the school board to have the option to do surveys when they decide should the survey be anonymous or not. I think it's very powerful. An example of why that's important is if they actually knew how people felt about the bond, then they knew it had a high likelihood of failing. So knowing your community is extremely important, would have saved millions of dollars and many months, would have accelerated all the projects. All right. Jeff, Nareen, any closing thoughts?
Well, I want to thank everyone for coming. I would like to thank you for a lot of insightful questions. I think it's very uplifting to see, topical questions bringing up interesting ideas about the curriculum and, new ideas of sharing information with other school districts. This is all kind of, I think, provides, good examples of what the board could do by leveraging the resources of the community and ideas. When you kind of open source them a bit and just let people's voices in, you come up with new ideas and produce better products. So thanks everyone for coming tonight. And yeah, we appreciate it.
Anything you'd like to add, Nareen?
No, just thank you. I really appreciate everyone joining us tonight and asking your questions and hearing from us. We're really dedicated to our school district, and we really want to bring Edgemont excellence in a more bigger, renewed, reimagined way. And so just thank you for coming out and appreciate your time.
We'll do it again tomorrow night, 7:30, Monday night. Same Zoom link. Thanks for your time, everyone, and good night.